Hey guys, it's Flip Cards here, live and direct from Brooklyn, New York. And in front of me today, what a treat, check this thing out. I have a box of 2003-2004 ITG Parkhurst Chicago Blackhawks Original 6 up in the mix. Configuration 6 cards per pack, 24 packs per box, 144 cards including decoys. Brief history because it's sort of necessary. I am a retro breaker, vintage breaker. OPGs existed in 1930s and 1940s, but then there was like this gap of 10 years, primarily because of World War II, until Parkhurst were introduced, which represented this golden age in the 1950s of card collecting. So 51-52 would have been the rookie year of Richard, Howe, and Sawchuk. And then this golden age ran from 51 through 64, and these packs cost like 5 cents for these Parkhurst packs. Ultimately, they were supplanted, of course, by OPG and Topps and the rest of the stuff throughout the 80s and 90s. But Parkhurst was reintroduced by ITG in the game. Dr. Price sort of reintroduced these throwback cards. There were the Missing Links, which were throwbacks in the 1950s. There was the Tall Boys throwbacks in the 1960s, or even the Pop-Ups, which were really 1930s throwbacks. And later he did these original 6 cards. So they're, of course, of the original 6 teams. I'm doing the Chicago one upon request. So that's basically it. And then Upper Deck ultimately acquired Parkhurst. But there's all kinds of stuff going on. Yeah, that's it. Basically 6 cards per pack, 24 packs per box. And then you have a tier checklist. You would have the base set running 1 through 60, the All-Stars, which are 61 through 70, the Captains, 71 through 80, Enshrines, 81 through 90, and then the franchise leaders. What else do you need to know? There are some normal inserts, 1 in 7 packs, so it'd be 3.4 insert cards. You would get the retired numbers, the trophy winners, the first rounders. And then there are potentially game-used memorabilia, which are the stick and jersey, game-used gears, vintage memorabilia, stuff like that. If you're wondering whether there were rookies in here, I think there are 4 true rookie cards in here. Tuomo Ruutu and Travis Moen would be probably the best and well-known ones. So that's basically it, man. I don't think we're really guaranteed anything other than a memorabilia card. We're not guaranteed an auto, so it will be interesting to see. It will take a while to open this, to pull all these cards out of here, because it's 24 packs, which is quite a bit, and it's mostly base, but it's really a historical product about the history of our game. So let's see what we get. Really nice, really cool looking packs already. I like it. Let's see, so how does this look to you? Does that look nice? Pretty handsome, right? Okay, so let's go, guys. Let's knock these off. Look at the packs, though. Look how nice these packs are. Super white. All right, let's rip and roar these, man. Cool. It's really hard to read these. That's probably going to be a little bit difficult. Niemanen. Here we have Bobby Hull. Bobby Hull would be the top goal scorer in the history of Chicago, which is kind of interesting. He's second all-time in points, of course, for Chicago. And then we have these original 6 2 points. So this is a redemption program, I believe, for jersey cards. Pretty cool to have those as well. Interesting that that's in a Red Wings one. There's Zamnov, who wore the C. Really cool-looking cards. History of Blackhawks captains. So this is one of those captain inserts. And then we have the franchise leader in Steve Larmer. Cool, good to know. So this is Tuomo Ruutu. So this, I believe, is what? Just a base card. These are just base cards, okay. Jeremy Roenick had a nice long career. There's Dennis Hull. Sort of lesser known Hull, I guess, but he played his entire career with Chicago. And here is Tony Esposito. Really nice. Tony Esposito was, what, 10th or 11th all-time in wins in the NHL, and one of the first people to do the hybrid mass. And there we do have a Denis Savard Enshrined. Denis Savard picked 3rd overall in 1980, 5 times put up 100 points in his career. So this is the back of the Enshrined card. Denis Savard, of course, won a Stanley Cup with Montreal, even though he's injured in 1993. Oh, look at this. So here we have the Howie Morenz card. Of course, Howie Morenz played a couple of seasons with Chicago. He broke his thumb, and I think he ultimately got picked up by the Blackhawks. Of course, he later died after a really bad hit, and I think he died of a heart attack ultimately in the hospital. And this one here is, what are these? It's really hard to tell the difference between these various cards, various inserts. So this would probably just be a base card if it's card number 37. Okay. Michel Goulet, who was traded to Chicago with none other than a goaltender who you may or may not know. Captains, Tony Amonte, who wore the C, and Bobby Hull. Bobby Hull probably would have had 900 goals had he not played in the WHA. The goaltender I was thinking of was Greg Millen, by the way. Goulet and Millen were involved in the same trade. And here is the Jocelyn Thibault card. I think he was drafted 10th overall by Quebec. Original 6 points. There's Chris Chelios, who played 26 seasons. And there is an Enshrined of Bobby Hull. Really hard to see some of these names, actually. There's Burke Henry. There's Steve Sullivan, who was only 5'7". Ken Hodge, who wore number 8 later in his career and actually had a swimming pool the shape of an 8. He actually even wore number 88. He was one of the original players to wear 88. That was when he was with the Rangers. Here's Denis Savard, a captain's card. Franchise leaders of Tony Esposito. So Tony Esposito, I believe he was 10th all-time in wins in the NHL and still is. I think Glenn Hall is 11th. Speak of the devil, here's Glenn Hall. Glenn Hall, I think, is honestly one of the best players to ever play our sport. He was a 13-time All-Star. He won the Vezina 3 times. He won the Conn Smythe in a year that he did not win the Cup. He brought a new franchise, expansion team, St. Louis team, to the Cup 3 years in a row in the late 60s. I think he was an Ironman. So much to say about Glenn Hall. Glenn Hall, definitely one of the best players to ever play the game. Here's Bill Mosienko, who was a Lady Byng winner, I believe. Retired numbers, there's the retired number of Glenn Hall. So much to say about Glenn Hall. He, of course, is a Hall of Famer. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1975. Doug Wilson, who at the end of his career played for San Jose Sharks and now is their GM, I believe. And here is an Enshrined of Glenn Hall. So we're getting quite a few Glenn Halls. Yeah, Glenn Hall also has an Ironman record, I think over 500 games, which is very impressive. He also won a couple of Stanley Cups, too. I think he won the Stanley Cup twice and once also as a coach. There's Eric Daze from Quebec. Samnov. And there's Bobby Orr, who I believe it must have been around 76, 77 when he was with Chicago. He could barely play at this point, unfortunately, sadly. There's Pierre Pilote, Hall of Famer, wore the C. And Mosienko, another one of him. Pierre Pilote, I believe he retired a Leaf. I think he was basically with Chicago's entire career until his last year. Igor Radulov, this is the older brother of Alexander. There's Charlie Gardner, who died at 29. Charlie Gardner was a perennial all-star, also won a couple of cups. Doug Wilson, points. Bill Gadsby, I believe he's another Hall of Famer. And Stan Mikita. Stan Mikita is first all-time in points for Chicago. Probably 14th or something all-time for the rest of the teams, for the rest of the NHL. I'm not entirely sure. That's actually a good question. Oh, he's 15th. I think he was 15th, actually. Brian Berard, who lost an eye. Brett McLean. There's Dougie Gilmore, who hoisted in 1989 on Montreal home ice. Captain's card of his, a franchise leader of Stan Mikita, and probably would have to be points because he was top all-time. Oh, assist, so it was assist. He was top all-time in points and assists. Bobby Hull was top all-time in goals, or is. These wrappers are actually fairly easy to open, which is nice for a change. Mark Bell. So there's a couple of players here who, I guess around 2003, 2004 would have just been players on the team around the time, so they're not necessarily all-stars or anything. And there we have a Dominic Hasek, who sort of developed fairly late. Of course, he's a Hart winner, so that's all you really need to say about him. And here again is Charlie Gardner, who died really young due to an infection that sort of got out of control. And there's Michel Goulet, who was a stud on the Quebec Nordiques for many years. Oh, look at this card here. First rounders. Roenick, he was an 8th overall. I don't know if it says it here. In 1988, he should be 8th overall. I'm not sure whether they state it. But this is an insert card in the C series, so it's not just the base checklist. There's Pierre Pilote, who was born in Quebec. I think he passed away in Ontario. And there's Glenn Hall again. Glenn Hall, so he was goaltender for St. Louis. He actually also played for Detroit at the beginning of his career. Steve McCarthy, Sean Thornton, who sort of made a name for himself on Boston. And there's Phil Esposito, a very young and nimble looking Phil Esposito. Phil Esposito, I think, is 10th all-time in points in the history of the NHL with 1,590. Stan Mikita, and there another Pierre Pilote. So these are the enshrined. So we see that there's captains, there's enshrined, there's retired numbers, there's all kinds of inserts. Or base checklists, if you will, tier checklist cards. Continuing on, Pierre Pilote again. Oh, we do have something here, and I believe here I'll save that. I think that is a jersey card of some sort. We shall see. Igor Korolev and Kenny Warham. I believe Kenny Warham was on the scooter line with Stan Mikita. And there's Ted Lindsay, who may have been on that line right at the end of his career, actually, as well. And there is Eddie Belfour, 4th all-time in wins in the NHL, and an enshrinement of Bill Gadsby. Had an illustrious career, did Bill Gadsby. Continuing on here. Is that Michael Layton? I think so. There's Denis Savard, who was known for his spinoramas. Both Serge Savard and Denis Savard had spinoramas. Again, 3rd overall in 1980. The Habs picked Wickenheiser. They had the first pick in 1980. They ultimately got him in a trade with Chelios, I believe. Tony Esposito. And Chris Chelios, the Iron Man himself, played till around 47, 48 years old. And Bobby Hull, franchise leader, probably in goals. Indeed. So mostly sort of base inserty stuff. I'll sort of pull them all apart in the recap, and you can just, oh, see, here's Travis Moen. He played for the Habs for many years, mostly a 4th liner. This would be a rookie card of his. It's a numbered rookie card. So as I said, there's a couple of rookie cards in here. There's Bobby Hull, Magnuson, Another one, here's a captains of Stan Mikita, and another one of Tony Esposito. So there's multiple types of Tony Esposito and Stan Mikita cards. John Clem, Vorobiev, another Plot, points of the Habs. Dirk Graham, mostly known for his mustache, in effect here. He also was a captain, longtime Chicago Blackhawk. And there again, Denis Savard. This one's a bit dinged, unfortunately, and it's a franchise leader in points. Again, so he had five 100-plus point seasons. Of course, Gretzky had 200-point seasons. Continuing on, and here is Craig Anderson. So this is Craig Anderson, who's now with the Sens. He certainly was with the Blackhawks early in his career. He's now the oldest player in the NHL at around 37 years old. Pat Stapleton and Ken Warham again, who was on the scooter line. One of the most renowned lines in the history of the game. And there's Phil Esposito, original 6, Enshrined. There's another Eddie the Eagle. Pretty cool, right? That's a pretty nice one of Eddie the Eagle. And there's Harry Lumley. Harry Lumley played on every original 6 team. A lot of people know him from Toronto. The one team he did not play on is the Habs. He played on the other 5 original 6 teams, believe it or not. And there's a Stan Mikita Enshrined. Fun stuff, man. And this is before his hybrid mask, I gather. He actually started his career with the Habs, believe it or not. Through an intra-league draft. It's 1969. And there is the hybrid mask. It's a bit of a scary looking mask. Those early masks were actually kind of frightening. So there are some duplications, unfortunately, with regard to these base cards, but that's just the name of the game. And there's Darren Pang, who a lot of people know from Pittsburgh, but he was an analyst for many years. Is an analyst, remains with NBC, I believe. There's Zamnov, there's Steve Larmer. So top points by a rookie, Steve Larmer. So this is really an interesting program, the point system, and it literally works. Unfortunately, all that stuff is outdated at this point. And this cat here, Kukkonen, was a rookie that year as well, so that's sort of worth noting, perhaps. There's Bill Gadsby. And another Denis Savard Enshrined. I have all the cards in a massive pile, a little bit disorganized today, but I'll make sense of them in the recap. Tuomo Ruutu, Stan Mikita, Habs, and again another one of Charlie Gartner. Charlie Gartner was Scottish. He was born Scottish and initially had difficulty getting to play with the Blackhawks and getting into the country because the Scottish quota was surpassed at that point when he was trying to get in. This was, of course, when he was in his 20s. Now, this is a cat who won the Stanley Cup a couple of times and was a 3-time All-Star, was Charlie Gartner. Here's another Dominator. Look at his pads. Those are old school pads. Look how beaten up they are. I guess there's snow on them. And there's Tony Amonte, who had a wonderful 15-year career, American-born player from Massachusetts. And here's the captains of Pierre Pilote and another Chris Chelios, who his 26 seasons is the record. I think Gordie Howe is the only other person who played 26 seasons. So I did receive one memorabilia, so we'll see what it is. Here it is, actually. I think we've gotten a good look at it already. There's Dougie Wilson, GM of, oh, it's Bill Mosienko. No, it isn't Bill Mosienko. We'll see who it is. It's Peter Forsberg. But I guess this is a 35 points versus Chicago. See, these are points that he put up against Chicago. So that's the nexus, the connection there. You have received a shooter's card from the Parkhurst Original 6 Series. On the front of this card is a piece of game used, Peter, from an Avalanche jersey. Through the 2002-2003 season, Peter Forsberg has scored 35 points versus Chicago. So that's why we got this. I was kind of confused, man. Why did we receive an Av? It's a nice jersey card nonetheless. Kind of bizarre. What an interesting box. I'll do a recap. Okay, guys, time for the recap. So they're banging downstairs, so I don't know what's going on with that. But I did make sense of this salad of cards. We did receive the point program cards, which are these decoys. You send these in to receive jersey cards, theoretically. It has all the emblems of the original 6. We did receive the base non-alums, which would have been all the players on the team in 2002, 2003, 2004, in that era. So we received most of these with duplicates, probably missing a couple in this base set of not 130, the first 30 cards. The next 30 cards were the alums. And of course, you see Hall of Famers, Eddie Belfour, Gilmore. Here's Charlie Gardner, who I love, died at 29. Here's Howie Morenz, who died at 34. He did play 2 years in 1934-35, of course, with the Blackhawks. But really cool, all the alum cards in here, including Denis Savard, 3rd overall in 1980. Of our base cards, we did actually receive a couple of the rookie cards. In fact, we probably received all the rookies, but these are the notable ones. Tuomo Ruutu was 9th overall in 2001 by Chicago, and Travis Moen was drafted by Calgary in the 5th round and played on the Montreal Canadiens for quite a few years, maybe 5-6 years. We did receive the All-Star subset, also from the base subset, so it would be numbered cards. They are banging downstairs. But you can see we do have Glenn Hall, who's one of my favorite historical players, 13-time All-Star, and a Conn Smythe Trophy winner in defeat. There's Charlie Gardner, again, who's also an All-Star, a perennial All-Star for the 3 years. He died at 29, as I mentioned. And there, Tony Esposito, Stan Mikita, who's first all-time in points. First all-time in points for Chicago, of course. So those are the All-Stars. In terms of the captains, we did receive the captains subset. So it's a 10-card subset, again, with duplicates, probably missing one or something in the subset. Gadsby, all the important cats, like Hall of Famer Pierre Pilote from Quebec initially. We did receive the Enshrined cards, so these would be people inducted, I believe, into the Hall, as you can tell. So there's Denis Savard, who's 3rd all-time in points with Chicago. And again, Stan Mikita, who's 1st in points, you know, and all the big name players, if you will, if you would. So we received all of those. In our tier checklist, we did also equally receive the franchise leaders. So these are the leaders in goals and points and assists, etc. This would be in career wins. Tony Esposito, who's 10th all-time in the, not only the franchise, and franchise is probably first, 10th all-time in the history of the game, pardon me. What else did we receive? We did receive the other inserts. So there were inserts that are supposed to land, I believe, 1 in 7 packs. I think we received more than that. So we did receive these trophy winners, the Esposito, the Hull, and the Pierre Pilote. So these are cards numbered in the C's. Not the ocean, but the C letter. We did also receive 2 retired numbers. One would be Glenn Hall, who took St. Louis to the Cup 3 times in a row in the late 60s, as well as Stan Mikita, 15th all-time in points in the NHL. And finally, we received a first-rounder card. So it would happen to be Jeremy Roenick, 8th overall, I believe, in 1988. And we did receive 1 jersey card, and strangely, the jersey card was of Forsberg because of the points that he got against Chicago, which is kind of bizarre. Very sort of early 2000 looking point series, very ITG type points card. Kind of cool. I mean, it's not a Chicago Blackhawk. So that's it, guys. So I open this upon request. I open historical boxes. I open vintage boxes. I give all my cards away when people ask for them. So if you want these, you can take them. I happen to be Fulton Cards. Please subscribe. Please provide a like. And please provide a comment. Fulton Cards live and direct from a place called Brooklyn, New York.